You think with this big, beautiful bill, are they trying to kind of get rid of the in-home care piece?
There's even bigger players, hospitals that have said, we're just folding up shop. We're not doing it. Collecting on the back end is hard. And with some of the clients that I've served, to them, $8,000 or 8 to 16 grand is, that's a lot. That's hard. But when you're working with debt collectors, they're not usually looking to touch something until it's like much higher.
Well, I see a lot of agencies, they struggle to get paid on time.
Yeah.
So let's talk about securing debt.
OPPS, the Outpatient Prospective Payment System rule, is advising on like a 90% cut.
90% cut?
Yeah.
People are trying to get into wound care at this time.
Yeah.
And they're proposing a 90% cut. Right. Payer mix is very important because you have the wrong payer type. If you just have one, then you could really be in jeopardy, especially if you are government funded. And if you've been, relying on Medicaid and just lolly-da, just spending and doing whatever, you really need to buckle down ASAP.
People are kind of in slight denial.
They should be speaking to someone like you, an attorney. So many things that you could miss.
Oh, yeah.
So if you could give every 7-figure home care CEO listening just one legal move to protect and grow their business in 2025 or 2026, what would it be?
What I tell a lot of home care agencies, home health is,
all right. Okay. So I'm super excited to have you on today. We've been meeting and our conversations have been awesome. So before we dive into all the legal strategies, right? I love for our listeners to get to know you. So what drew you into healthcare law and why are home healthcare agencies or home care agencies such a unique challenge from a legal perspective?
So I, as long as I can remember, was interested in law. I think I probably was like a lot of kids who like to watch like old school Law and Order. And I was drawn more to being a prosecutor for a while, but then going through some difficulties with getting services and reimbursement personally for members of my family, I felt like there was just a lot of things that pulled me into understanding the healthcare system and reimbursement. And I just always felt like having a law degree was the best use to sort of be able to force people to do something where without it, people aren't as scared, I guess. So I like to be able to use my services for that sort of thing. And especially with independent providers these days becoming fewer and fewer, I was just drawn to sort of helping in that arena. So, and I think it's been a fruitful career thus far.
Yeah, that's good. I like that. Okay. So from your experience, how does that shape the way that you advise those agencies?
It's really difficult these days. It's, everybody is again becoming like like fewer independent providers. So they're getting bought up by sort of the bigger players. And it's just harder to do sort of the community-based services that we were used to seeing. I think probably like more in the 90s, you saw more independent providers. And so the home health and home care providers still really, I think, rely on sort of that community feel, and people like that more, I think, and they're more willing to do it, I think, for the community, as opposed to sort of these really big agencies where they might try to send people from, an hour away. It's not as conducive for that sort of feel, and they don't always know what's needed for the community. So in terms of helping home care and home health agencies, they are usually dealing with like a lot fewer resources. They have to be really savvy in what they use. And they really kind of depend on sort of the other community leaders and things like that to sort of get an idea of what they need to do and keeping up with the changing regulations and things like that.
Wow, you said a whole bunch. And the fact that a lot of these bigger companies are buying out the smaller agencies, so in the future, it's hardly going to be any of those in the community.
It's hard. It's really hard these days. And I think, something that I've heard in the community over the last couple months is that what the smaller agencies could do is probably try to get on the same page and speak as one voice. Would be really hard for them to sort of use, their identity to come together and try to have a voice on what they want in terms of, pay, reimbursement, all those sort of state level issues. They I think have more of a voice than they think when they're willing to come together. But,
Mm,
doing a lot of the things themselves and how difficult it is with, tracking reimbursement, making sure what if they actually got reimbursed what they
right,
should have been paid, that sort of thing, keeping up with, being an employer, making sure people get there on time, actually do a good service, act the way
right.
they're supposed to act, actually do the services. It's all really hard to do. And you have a lot of people who are taking up these services being trying to be kind of a one-man show, and
Yeah.
it's just a little too hard to do that these
Yes.
days. Yeah.
I was gonna ask you that because when I hear you saying that, it just sounds like the agencies in the communities are really not running as a business should.
Yeah.
And so that's what's making these big players come in and buy them
Oh, yeah,
out.
they just have the resources. They have the infrastructure that is just like, we already got a lot of it, so we can just absorb this and take it on. But there's been continued issues with that, and that they
Mm,
always like to say we can come in and do it faster and cheaper, but it's not maybe the service that people really want, is what
right.
I would say.
And that's so crazy because that's what sets these
The
home care
community
agencies,
based.
yeah,
Yeah.
community based, that's what sets them apart because they are needed in the community. Like you're able to service more, you know exactly what the community needs because you live in that particular community or you're surrounded by them and you have a relationship with the people.
Right.
So man, it's so important. Like the big players, they're not playing.
It's definitely, I would say, the critique overall of like private equity or the bigger ones coming in, and that like they love to say they can do it cheaper, but and it, with reimbursement getting squeezed, I mean,
Right.
it's a very enticing play, but at the same time, I think there's been a lot of not necessarily cover up, but I would say downplay of the bigger guy coming in and
Mhm.
probably not doing as good of a job as they promised, and
Right.
maybe even overall you know doing such a inadequate job that they fold up shop and there's nothing available
Right.
anymore.
It's something that you said. You said for the agencies, they need to kind of band together.
Mhm.
What does that look like if they need to band together when it comes to like the bigger players buying them out?
Right.
Is that because they need to make sure they're supporting one another and building and
Re
growing?
Yeah, and really having that community where they come together to be like, well, what are you seeing with the
Hmm.
insurance companies? What issue are you experiencing? I'm experiencing that too. The association is definitely, one of that. I think that they've been in a long time, and it's somewhere that they can use their voice to come together because they are tracking those issues regularly.
Right.
So, and they try, I think, really hard to warn upfront, being like, hey, this is coming. You need to pay attention to this. And so that state level advocacy, they have more of a chance, I think, of
Mm.
making a difference than they think if they
Hmm.
just, really try to
Band together.
take some time. Um, to do sort of the advocacy days, maybe coming together to do those advocacy
Hmm.
days, going, during the General Assembly sessions to be like, hey, this is what we need, that sort of thing.
I have something else for you, but I'm gonna wait till later
Okay.
because we about to this is really good. But I talk to home care CEOs all the time who are shocked when their revenue slip, right?
Right.
So from your perspective, what are the biggest threats to an agency's revenue in 2025?
Well, in 2025, I think they're kind of looking for sort of what's coming, and the proposed home care rule that came down from Medicare, which is for home health in particular.
Yeah.
With all the adjustments together, they're looking at around a 6.4. I think it's six. It's a permanent adjustment of negative 4.05%. There's a temporary adjustment of around negative 5%. And overall, the net impact, they are projecting a 6.4 percent decrease in those Medicare home health payments.
Mm.
So that's specifically for agencies that are doing home health.
Home health. Okay.
And the thing is, they talk about it in the summer, and there's always that delayed impact until 2026. So it's
Right.
like, you hear about it, but you don't really feel it for a couple more months. And
Right.
that's always something they say, in law, when I was in law school, they say, what is the thing that actually deters crime? And they say, I think the word is salinity, meaning like it's quick. So
Yeah.
it's like if you were to be told that, in a week you're payment adjustment is going to go down, you would probably work a lot
Oh,
faster.
yeah.
But when it's home health, it's 6 months out, you're like, you kind of
Right.
can delay or
Right.
just, pretend it's not coming. It's like, no, it is coming. And by that, and if you don't plan, then, you can really kind of fold up shop
Right.
overnight. And with some of the major decreases that have hit, Medicare and Medicaid over the summer that are projected, there's even bigger players, hospitals that have said, we're just folding
Mhm.
up shop. We're not doing it but, those are not related necessarily to home health, but they've been so sick.
Right.
They're like, we can't keep operating like
That's
this.
important because home health agencies, they partner with
Oh, yeah.
hospitals and, a lot of their
Referral
clients. Yeah,
sources. Yeah.
exactly. So that affects them. If the hospital is closing up shop,
Yeah.
where those referrals going to come from,
Right, right. Thankfully, I haven't seen any in the direct Richmond area or
Yeah.
really Virginia. These were more Midwest, but I mean, that's sad to hear. You
Yeah.
don't want to hear that by any
Really,
means. Yeah.
it's not enough hospitals
Oh,
out
yeah.
here. What would it do for you if your home care business grew by 200% in just 12 months? Well, one of my clients went from being buried in the day-to-day to finally leading as the CEO of her business. I'm sharing 5 of my proven strategies that I use with my clients in a free guide. Make sure you comment the word increase in the comments. You said a lot. And this is what I want to say, because for the people, home health care, that is for skilled services,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So for the non-skilled portion, with this particular law, with the Medicare, they are not affected right now.
Not that piece, but the other thing you have to remember with the one big beautiful bill that went into play, again, those sort of ratcheted up requirements to
Yeah.
stay on Medicaid, that is not coming either until 2026. So if you don't plan, or if maybe there isn't someone helping your patients or your recipients, they might not, come 2026, they might be hit with a work requirement, or they might,
Right.
increase requirements to prove that they actually need these services. And, because of certain regulatory burdens and administrative requirements, lose coverage. So are you maybe looking
Right.
at your recipients to see who might be on the edge here, who might, like, we need to warn or help and be like, you're going to have to renew and make
Yeah.
sure that, you verify that you still need these services, sort of thing. So, and that is on sort of the non-skilled piece, that those
Right.
Medicaid cuts. And then there's, of course, agencies that take strictly commercial. And, for that, I would just say, generally speaking, with how expensive it is, you just have to look at, how can I secure the revenue coming in?
Correct. So they need to be very, and I mean
Diligent.
very,
Yeah.
yes, diligent and proactive,
Mhm.
not reactive,
Yeah.
proactive. Wow. Wow. So a lot of agencies, they assume that their contracts have them covered until they don't. So what does that wake up call usually look like?
When they realize that something's not covered.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, something like that in terms of using my services, they usually will kind of ask, well, who's going to pay for this? And, ultimately, you have to look at the contract that you have with the recipient or the patient. And I feel bad for everyone involved, because usually a lot of people who start these agencies, they have a good heart,
Right.
but ultimately, they have to pay if, the insurer is not going to.
Right.
Unless you think you have like a good appeal to make, or, you really want to fight it, that's one thing. But if it's really something that's not covered, and if it's not skilled, it can be really hard, especially if they don't have Medicaid. You're usually looking at the patient, and, no one wants to really get into a disagreement with the recipient, because,
Right.
they're usually in vulnerable situations. So I would it's hard at that point to tell them that, like, you're gonna have to look at them to pay. So you like kind of what you said about being proactive. You really have to have those talks and clarifications on the front end with
Right.
those recipients.
So I like what you said, because that shows private pay. So when you have private pay home care or home health agencies, it really opens the door where you really have to keep your I's dotted and your T's crossed, because one little hiccup, like, it could really mess up a lot in the agency. So you have to be really proactive with your clients that you
Right.
currently service, and your contract too.
Yes, the contracts, I would say, again, everyone comes with a good heart, but if you're not operating in, in the black or with a plus margin,
Right.
you're not going to be able to serve anybody. So
Mm.
something I would definitely look at is really vetting. I'm not sure. I know that kind of sounds a little harsh, but the people that you take on, and if someone looks like they don't have the most, or they're questionable in terms of payment, look at getting a guarantor in your
Right.
contracts, because it's collecting on the back end is hard. And
Right.
the thing is, with some of the clients that I've served, to them, $8,000 or 8 to 16 grand is, that's a lot. That's
Yes.
hard. But when you're working with debt collectors, they're not usually looking to touch something until it's like much higher.
Mm.
And they're definitely not willing to buy the debt until it's much higher.
Mm.
So, but I totally understand. Yeah, that for
Right.
someone individually, that's hard to take, that numbers that are
You just
smaller.
gave them a big nugget there. Have
Yeah.
a guarantor
Tour.
with your contracts,
Yes.
just in case the client, their self, whoever is on there, cannot
Usually,
pay.
because usually with these situations too, you're looking at usually an adult child with a parent managing their funds or
Yeah.
helping them
Right.
manage. So you're usually dealing with that person in between too. And so I would say, even if there isn't a power of attorney set in place, first of all, I would probably, if someone else is helping like that, you need to be asking for that. Be like, you
Right.
should just be able to step in. But even without a power of attorney, you are allowed to get a guarantor for some of these contracts.
Mm.
And so if you really have a suspicion, or, they're in a situation where you might be out the money, get a guarantor, because
Mm.
recovering from an estate is harder.
Wow. That's important right there.
Yeah.
So I see a lot of agencies, they struggle to get paid on time.
Yeah.
So let's talk about securing debt, kind of like what you just
Yeah.
kind of spoke about. So for someone who's never thought about it, what does that actually look like, and how can it change their ability to collect?
So securing debt on once you have not got paid, you already have the debt accrued. When to secure debt, you really have to go get judgment. You have to go get
Right.
judgment in court. And that basically says, a court of law has decided this is a valid debt, they really owe it, and, ordering them to pay the debt. But obviously, we know of plenty of situations that even with the judgment, someone does not go ahead and
Right.
pay. So after that, usually you have to what they call docket the
Mhm.
debt. And usually that's where you put a judgment lien against property if the recipient patient has property to
Mm.
secure, and if it's worth it. Usually it's only worth it if it's actual land or a house or something like that,
Mm.
where it's rare that you'll see some sort of lien against a car. Like, I
Right.
don't think that that generally happens. And then once it is docketed, and I guess you don't have to docket it, but it's something that is always, once it's on, once it is docketed, it's like notice to anybody else who would pull these records. It's like, if they were gonna try to sell it without you getting paid,
You're gonna
those people have noticed you
Right.
docketed it. You have to pay before
Right.
it's transferred. But even with that, there's certain other things, debts that can come ahead of that. Usually all sorts of
Mhm.
property, if it is a house or something like that, there's a mortgage usually.
Right.
A mortgage will always, because it was used to purchase the property, will supersede any of those judgments.
Mm.
And you have to realize there's other people that might have had judgments that if they docketed it before yours or got their judgment ahead of it,
Right.
they're going to be ahead of you. And
Mhm.
another one that usually always supersedes is the IRS. So there's
Mm.
all these things that even if you act very quickly, you could be behind those, and
Mm.
behind much larger debts that could supersede yours. So
Right.
what I tell a lot of home care agencies, home health, is, you could pursue getting the judgment and docketing in it. And, there's even other, once you, after that, you have to go back to court to ask for a garnishment or a levy or something like that. And you might not get anything.
Mm.
So that is really hard to swallow for a lot of people. Because
Yeah.
as I said, I was like, believe me, I understand those are big numbers. But, when you're dealing with debt collection,
Yeah.
the numbers, they only start kind of wincing when the numbers are even bigger.
I don't know if they really understand what you just said, because
Mhm.
what you just told them is, in order to secure debt, if something happens to the client,
Yeah.
right?
You have to pay
Then
money to get money. That's the
Right.
thing.
And then
That's the long and the short of it. And you might
yes,
not even get anything.
is that yeah, you might be at the bottom end. So if
Yeah.
they have a mortgage that's due, if they owe the IRS,
IRS.
all those people that they may owe, you may come at the last end if there's anything left.
And if there's an estate, it's usually debts that are coming
Yeah.
before yours. So it's even more important again to look on the front end on how you secure it on the front. So getting a guarantor is usually better. I would say there's times where you don't have to worry as much, but
Right.
I think once you really, suss out sort of the patient, once you have them on, it's a lot more difficult to get a
Yeah.
guarantor. So it's like on
Get
the
that
front end.
guarantor
Yeah, on the front
in
end.
the beginning, like, be very proactive, and that's what we teach also for agencies, to be proactive when it comes to their business.
And remembering in other people in these sort of longer term healthcare realms use other things like that. So a continuing care retirement community, which is much bigger operation.
Yeah.
People usually will sell their house to them in exchange for this care sort of thing. So they've already had that security of like, we already have the
Right.
assets. So
Right.
realizing that you're not the only, in the long-term care space, it's not unheard of and not,
Right.
it's more common than you think to get a guarantor for these sorts of
Yes,
things.
they definitely need it.
Yeah.
That's part of running the business
Business.
and not being the caregiver or just that one man
Right,
show.
right.
So very important, very important. So I love real life examples. So can you share a story without naming names of any agency that went from struggling to collect payments to getting paid faster?
You're getting paid faster
Yeah.
or collecting on debt?
Well,
Because unfortunately, the
mhm.
collecting on debt it's just, my first job out of college was as a paralegal doing debt collection for a law firm.
Yeah.
And it was like you had to have a lot of hits at bat before you got it. And then also too, this was 2012, so
Yeah.
4 years after the housing crisis.
Mm.
So it was hard. And if you
Yeah.
got money, it wasn't like you were getting pennies on the dollar. So
Right.
really pursuing debt collection action, I would say was it's not great. It's not great. But getting paid on the front end, taking those measures to again revise their contracts. I did have one in the Northern Virginia area. After I explained to him, the
Yeah.
efforts and everything, we revised their contracts. We did look at the guarantor a little bit more. And, he was able to sort of expand into another service line because he was doing a lot
Yeah.
better in that way. That was nice to be able to kind of help him sort of, again, on the front end, be like, we're going to look at this a little bit better. And he
Mhm.
was able to expand his
So
business.
basically, when they're doing their contracts, especially in this industry, they should be speaking to someone like you, an attorney, so that on the front end, they're already
That
protected.
did, yes, that they've at least have options. And again, sometimes you might not have the option to have someone who's going to guarantee it, and that's risk you have to take. And
Right.
you might be willing to take someone without the guarantor if you know the reimbursement on that person's going to be good enough for what you have.
Right.
But the other thing is, and that's fine, understanding it. But then again, if payment is getting interrupted, then you have to be able to get out of that agreement quicker than, something where you're racking up again the
Right.
$16,000 of debt and
Correct,
that sort of
correct.
thing.
Because you still have caregivers
Yeah,
and, whoever else and,
right.
that you have to pay
And again,
overhead.
and having those contractual exits
Yeah.
in there so they know it's like, well, if once payment is not here, we haven't received payment for this time,
Right.
we'll cut off services like this. And making sure that you're not like what they call like abandoning the patient in a way where they knew that sort of thing. And it's all front end planning with the
Yes.
contracts and things like that.
They definitely need an attorney
Yeah,
on their side because this industry is it's not like, you can get into e-commerce or
yeah,
however. This is healthcare. This is
yeah.
home health and it's very particular. If you don't do the things you're supposed to do on the front end, it's going to be very hard for you to survive later on.
Right. And you also don't want to get in trouble with any of the regulators. There's a long-term care ombudsman where you report sort of, elder abuse and things like
Yeah.
that. So you want to be able to tell them on the front end, have a very compelling argument. We had sort of the
Mhm.
required terms in our contract. We gave them required notice, but we weren't getting paid, that sort of thing. And we still, took care of our responsibilities and made sure, they had any of the required services or things from us, but we had to cut it off. So
Right.
that is sort of when you're in this space, That's the difference. So, yeah, it's
Yeah.
not like software where it's like, "You didn't pay, just cut it off." It's not like that,
Yeah.
unfortunately. Mm.
Wow. I had a question for you. What provision would you add to every home care contract that would really protect their revenue? But you really just answered it.
Yeah,
A few, you gave them a few actually, a
there's
guarantor.
guarantor,
Um, and you said another one about
being able to exit strategies, so
yeah,
termination, and, I would also talk about interest provisions, and then after and in addition to late payments and interest, again, being like, "If we don't receive this, we can cut it off at this certain amount of
right,
time." So again, if there's and being willing to pull the trigger. And I know that's hard
right,
for all of the, these are people in the community. I totally understand. And ultimately, it's a business and a judgment call, but at least you have that exit in your
right.
contracts. Yeah.
That's important. I like that. Those are so important. Y'all really got to make sure y'all take heed. Very important. So here's a really interesting piece. So strong contracts, they don't just protect agencies. They can actually help them win bigger clients and government contracts possibly. So how does that work? When they have those strong contracts when it comes to, providing other services, like you kind of gave an example
Right.
of one client you had in Northern
Yeah.
Virginia.
I mean, good contracts are clear for everybody. No one's like really guessing on like what the duties are here. They can't really claim and on the back end that they didn't know,
Right.
that sort of thing. And when I've dealt with getting contracts approved for home health and ones that are licensed through the state and everything, they usually are reviewed for how clear they are and if they have the
Mm,
required terms. And so that's the thing, that it's easy as it can be for the clients to understand as well.
right.
And that's that's the thing. You are dealing with a population that, it can be, they can be elderly, they can
Right.
have certain deficiencies that, might make it harder for them. So it's as clear as it can be, charts, tables of like what's required. That's something that I see usually, that it's like, there'll be a chart or a table where
Yeah.
it's like, these are the only things that we offer. So if it's not
Right.
checked, we're not doing it. So that's very easy for them to understand. Like, are you supposed to be doing sort of, transportation services? Is that
Right.
checked? That sort of thing.
So they need to make that very clear.
Yeah.
Very, very clear. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about deposits. So where do they fit into protecting cash flow? So how do you structure them so that they're legally solid and that they don't scare away good
Clients,
clients?
right. So, I mean, I think when it comes to a security deposit, again, that's certainly a tool that is something I've seen,
Yeah.
and you see in all sorts of long-term care arrangements. I think a key to that is that it's not overly burdensome for them to pay it,
Mm,
obviously, and that's some issues here. You won't, again, probably get security deposits on any of the home health required items because
right.
they're Medicare and Medicaid
Right.
reimbursed, but any of the services that are not being covered by any of the government programs, that's where you can get those.
Right.
And the thing there is that they're able to pay it, but that it is serious enough that they're going to take it seriously, and that they would feel a loss if they just stop doing the
Right.
service, is the sort of key there.
Mm. I know private pay is very popular in private pay for them to be able to do that
Yeah.
because they are private
Yeah.
pay. So it makes a lot of sense because if
Yes.
you don't have that, then you still have workers you have to
Okay,
pay
yeah, that it's
and
like
then you're
that,
out.
yeah, exactly. That again, it is that kind of buffer that it allows you to sort of like, well, if there's something that goes wrong, at least you had that to cover the time
Right.
where they weren't being paid.
Right.
So yeah, no, it is again, it's popular for any of either the private pay or any of the services that are just not going to be covered by any payer at
Mhm.
all, which and there is. It happens, frequently.
That's very strategic
Yeah.
in what they're doing. Like that's That's important because if you miss that step and you are a private pay or whatever services that you accept upfront from them,
Mhm.
then that could mess up your whole flow of your cash flow.
Yeah, and it's hard to go back to someone when you've already been providing service
Yeah.
to be like, "Now I'm gonna need a security deposit." That's probably not going to happen. So again, it's like, knowing how to structure everything on the front end and, getting that set up in a way where everyone's on the same page and
Right.
comfortable with the agreement before you start.
They need you on their team. Like, it is so important. I can't stress it enough, and I am not a home health care agency or
Right.
home care. Like, it's important as I'm listening, it's so many things that you could miss
Oh, yeah.
in this like, if you sit there and you didn't create the business, you've been operating 5,
Y
10,
yeah.
15 years, your contracts, one, they're most likely outdated,
Right.
and are they really up to date with what's happening?
Yeah, that is definitely another thing too, is that, regular review. I mean, it's a different world from when you were operating. Again, a lot of people who are just like, "Oh, I'm just gonna try to start a business," in the
Right.
90s, even the early 2000s, it was still kind of, you could still do it, but it's so regulated these days. The market for everyone and every business is very tight that it's, you can't really go a long time without reviewing, like, well, what are our contracts like? What are our models like?
Right.
That sort of thing, and being like, well, where are we in terms of where we sit with other competitors in the
Mm.
market, sort of thing. Like,
Yeah.
you do have to basically keep an eye on it a lot more.
Yeah, they have to be very proactive, very. So wow. So small claims court usually caps at 5,000,
Yes.
which seems very tiny for bigger agencies. So how can agencies still use it effectively as part of a collection strategy?
I mean, small claims, you could still use it again up to 5,000, and it's not like, I don't think that you accumulate 5,000 like overnight, so that's still
Right.
like a month or two, I would say you could try to file on your own. And small claims, you see less attorneys in there because it's small claims. It's,
Mm.
so one of those things where they allow a lot more flexibility with bringing claims, and that the rules to file are not as rigid, or they're forgiving if you
Yeah.
miss certain things, because they want to prevent people from, long drawn out processes, and you can get in there a lot quicker. It's when
Hmm.
you start going into circuit court where, the amounts are maybe like $25,000 and up,
Yeah.
which is, again, that would probably be several months that someone was not paying.
Mm.
It can take a longer time, and the rules are a lot stricter. You can't, the deadlines are tighter. They're not as forgiving if you miss those, that sort of thing.
Mm.
But I mean, you could definitely still use small claims. It's
Right.
not, I think the reality is that people are afraid to go to court by themselves. It just is true. And
Right.
it's not like people don't have an attorney in there, in small claims court. It's just it's a more common to see them without it, and
Right.
it's easier to try to use it yourself.
As I'm listening to you, everything that I hear you saying is a reaction to them not being proactive and being prepared. They're
Right.
just going into business and starting, and then now you got to go back and scramble and fix what was already messed
Is
up.
that correct? Yeah.
Wow.
And the reality is you can't, you know, the best planners, are still gonna be things that slip through. It's
Right.
just gonna be on the back end, like, if it was less than $5,000, how is doing that judgment a call of if it's worth your time to go after? Because again, once you're on the back end, you're gonna have to pay money to try to collect money,
Right.
and that
So
can
is
be
it worth it?
yeah,
Is it really worth your time and efforts and the money that you have to spend?
spend to go do it.
You
So
probably spend that amount trying
yeah,
to go and get
get it.
that.
And, again, having done debt collection, I'll say, if there's signs of the person's in stress, meaning like there's multiple collectors, just trying to find assets to try to collect on.
Right.
Remember, and there could be people ahead of you. That is work. So again, it can kind of, ratchet up pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a lot. Okay, so when you're advising a client, do you help them decide whether to pursue the small claims or just write off? Which we kind of just
We
spoke
do,
about
yeah.
that.
No, that's really what it comes down to is, if the person has passed and there's an estate,
Mhm.
there's estates, they're not, unfortunately, they're not quick to settle. So, like, in terms of getting paid out on that, it could be a couple years. And in addition to that, there usually will, at least if the person really does have a property, there's at least going to be a mortgage that's in front of you. So, you know, it's like a 50-50
Mm.
chance on if you're gonna get paid or not. I
Right.
mean, and you can usually, again, you can pull records to see if someone else is ahead of you, but you also usually only see that once you've secured judgment. So you've already paid some money to
Right.
start
So
collecting. And
right.
then, so in it, that happens all the time. You get into it and you realize like you've paid more money
It's not
and
worth
now
it.
you're not going to get anything. Yeah.
Mm. Okay. Well, so that's really a great thing that you help advise them on what to do and what not to do.
Yeah.
So hopefully they take your advice when you tell them.
It depends. I mean, and you know, advice is advice, right? You know,
Right.
there's all sorts of things you try to say. Nothing is an exact science here. That's
Right.
we can only I can only speak to sort of what I've gone to and realizing, you know, as again, I did debt collection in the 2008 to 2012 era when it was bad, you know, people were
Mm.
really losing their houses. So it was a different time to collect, but I would say probably since like 2015 to probably only in the last like since 2022, even 2023 when the whole
Mm.
like, you know, great resignation was happening, people were able to
Yeah.
switch jobs. It was a better time to try to, you know, try. It was a better time. There was more of a
Right.
possibility, but I think definitely since the start of 2025, people are really nervous and just do not have
Yes.
that extra money that
Yes.
like doing collections not as secure as it once was, I would say.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. This is definitely a different time. Things
Yeah.
are
Oh yeah.
happening left and right. You don't know what's
It's
coming.
coming. Yeah.
Um, Now wound care, we discussed wound care
Yes.
previously before. It can be incredibly profitable,
Oh
but
yeah.
very high risk, right? So how do you help agencies protect themselves legally while still being able to offer these premium services?
Right. So a premium service like wound care, you're really kind of going up with needing to get more of like a nurse practitioner or a
Hmm.
physician assistant or a physician who will do these. So you're getting into more of that skilled and you're
Yeah.
dealing with the Medicare reimbursement piece. It is kind of not kind of, it's really kind of in the hot spot now because the OPPS, the outpatient prospective payment system rule that also came out this summer, along with physician's fee schedule, home health, all the other big ones, um, is advising on like a 90% cut in
Yeah, I
reimbursement. So it's
agree.
very, very big cut, but it's only proposed. I'm going to think that they're going to revise that,
Yeah.
but ultimately they've just I think there's been a number of audits that shown that they're just like this is very, very expensive and it's very particular language you need in terms of being able to prescribe and how like your reasoning for why you're doing
Right.
it, these sort of very expensive skin grafts and things like that. So that sort of thing. I say it to a lot of clients, you know, front end auditing, making sure, but a lot of the compliance talk that I do for my clients, you have to remember they're dealing with limited resources. So
Right.
unfortunately, sometimes all they can really offer or all
Mm.
they can really come to me with is if they get in trouble on the back end. But
Right.
the main thing I would try to say is, good faith compliance, keeping up with any of the notices from CMS. And, if you're here in Virginia, anything put out by DMAS when it comes to sort of the payment piece.
Right.
Um, Good faith efforts in trying to review records, even if it's not as extensive as a private auditor, making sure, some sort of documented
Right.
demonstration that, we're try to review it. It can be anything from like meeting minutes or just, anything, any sort of communication that shows a good faith effort to keep up with the guidance that's coming out.
Wow, they have a lot that they have to watch, and a 90% cut?
Yes, very, yeah.
90%, oh my gosh.
Comment is still open on that. As I said, I think a lot of the big associations will push back, but yeah, I mean, how much, I don't particularly foresee it going down to like 10% after they, propose
90,
90%.
yeah,
I was like, I
that's
don't see
huge.
that. Yeah.
I see a lot of, people are trying to get into
It won't
wound care
care.
at this time,
Yeah.
and they're proposing a
Yeah. 90.
90%
Yeah.
cut.
Yeah.
This is a big deal,
Deal. Oh
actually.
yeah. No, it definitely is.
What they're proposing this cut for which year? Is it
2026, so coming up.
next year?
Yes, yes, so coming
Look,
up. So that would definitely stop the rush.
yeah,
Yeah.
next year, we're in, what, August, September,
Yeah.
October, November,
Less than
4
6
months
months.
away.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
90%, they are not playing.
No, no, they
Wow.
realize they're like, "This is really expensive," and it's like, yeah, I'm like, I think I heard and this could be wrong, but the reimbursement on it is like possible like $2,000 for every square inch of a
Yeah.
skin graft. So I'm not,
Oh,
you know,
it's up there. I've
yeah,
seen it. It
yeah,
is very expensive. So
yeah.
90% cut of
That,
that.
yeah, that'd be, I don't, yeah, that's so low. It's
All
like,
these years and they
yeah,
decide
well, it'd be
now.
like $100 then. Yeah, go from 2,000 to like $100.
What in the
Yeah.
world? This is so crazy how they've been functioning
Oh
all
yeah.
these years in wound care at this rate,
Right.
and all of a sudden in 25 at this
It's
time.
because of the way that it's labeled. It's like some sort of like bio not biopharmaceutical, that's the wrong word, but it's because it's almost some sort of like living com compounded. It's not skin is not compounded, but it's a bio something
Mhm.
where they want to reclassify it as some sort of like supply, almost like a
Mm.
regular supplies. And it's
Yeah.
like, well, it's not regular supplies. So they'd be like
Right.
reclassifying it to something where it's like clearly downgrading what it really is. That
Yeah.
would be why it's so substantial.
That's crazy because it's definitely not regular like skin grafting. Like
Yeah.
you're getting something put on your skin to what is it? Reattach
Yeah, like
like
regenerate in a way to
yeah.
close it and be more efficient. Yeah, and like less infection. I mean, there's a reason. I think they're showing a lot of effectiveness in how it works and everything, but it's definitely not cheap.
Yeah, it's not like tissue paper
No,
or a
yeah, and it's
bandage.
not supplies. Yeah, it's not
What
that
in
sort
the
of.
world? Like
Yeah,
we just have so much of the
yeah,
skin to go
just bring
around.
it in. Yeah, exactly.
Oh my goodness. So, are there any agreements or documentation you consider absolutely non negotiable when agencies provide high liability services like wound care?
I mean, I think the main thing to look at there is definitely, they always come back for medical necessity. That's the big one in the audits. Like, is it actually, is it really matching word for word what, the guidance is saying? Like, it's prescribed to, like, I think one of the examples in a case the case is not coming to me, but it was like the difference between like cure and enhance recovery. It's
Mm,
like if, what was the actual, um, order from the physician saying, like, the
yeah.
reason for doing it, because it's
Mm,
like and I think the guidance at the time was something like cure versus enhance, and, like, the company providing the wound care used the, latter enhance, and it's
yeah.
like, that's not enough, it should have been like yeah.
Wow.
So it's really came down very specifically to that, and I think that one was actually did go to court in terms and they were, they ended up having to pay it back, yeah, an overpayment, yeah. So
Mm,
that's really what it comes down to is and then again, on the front end, it's like, well, if you receive those orders
yeah.
and it's, it's not showing what you would need to get reimbursed, you have to talk to the physician. It's like, and either you just talk to them, it's like, is this really what you're talking about? Because then you have to let them know this probably won't get paid,
Mm,
won't be covered. So that's the sort of thing you really have to, because I think the way a lot of places work, labs, these sort of wound care clinics, they think, well, the order came from the physician, so that's enough. And it's like you have to keep up with sort of those
right.
medical necessity terms and
Mm,
what they're looking at and be like, is this enough to really prove it when,
right.
if I face a back end audit?
Ooh, this is really important
Mm.
because you can't just get into this industry and say I'm gonna do
Do
wound
it.
care.
Yeah.
You have to really look to see what's happening, and then for the physicians, the way that they write these orders affects your payment
Oh,
either
yeah.
today or
Tomorrow.
tomorrow.
Yes.
You could
Yeah.
have to pay
Years
back a
down
lot
the
of money.
line. Yeah.
Yeah.
Several years.
How
Yeah.
many years? Well, do you know the specific years that it can affect them? Like if they, say
We usually at least say like 6 years. You always
six
want to
years.
like, that's always a good time to look back and make sure that, that you have everything in order for at least that time. But yeah, like if you're, collecting on, 6 years, that's like, you know, who's paying it, who's doing that? Especially,
Right.
if they're trying to say the whole graph wasn't
Right.
medically necessary. It's like you could tell those overpayments that they're claiming on an audit on the back end enough to close the
6
place
years is
down.
a long time. You have to have a huge cushion because the wound care pays out, very high as of right now. So you have to have
Correct.
a huge cushion in those 6 years. Your planning needs to be well ahead when it
Good.
comes to the business side. It should be
Right.
very strategic,
Oh, yeah.
actually.
Yeah. And again, the auditing and, it's one of those where, again, I was like, just do what you can, good faith effort in some way, the unfortunate thing is to do like a real third party audit. It's
Yeah.
not cheap to do that. That's the thing. So people are like, well, again, limited resources. So I'm like, well, do what you can in terms of, good faith looking at
Right.
it and trying to show that you're trying to keep up.
Do what you
Can.
can.
Yeah.
If you don't have Rachel or in the capacity you need her or you should be doing what you can. I was about to say better, but you should be doing what you can because this is important.
Yeah.
So we've kind of talked about this big beautiful bill
Well,
that this
yeah.
administration has put into place. That's what they're calling that big beautiful bill,
Yeah.
right? So let's address that huge elephant in the room. So those reimbursement cuts that we kind of spoke about earlier coming in January, from a legal and a business protection standpoint, what should agencies be doing right now to not just survive, but actually position themselves for growth?
So, in terms of actually expanding, I think that you have to really think about the referral sources that you have.
Mm,
Check in on them, see like where, are they going to be able to survive this, and if there's a way to, help them unload from any of the cuts that we're seeing, especially if they are partnering with some of the traditional providers, the health systems and hospitals. The reality is a lot of they're really trying to push out a lot of the services from those traditional hospital inpatient
mm,
providers to home areas.
yeah,
So it's definitely, letting them know that you're there, keeping those up, keeping up those relationships to see if there's more that you can take on. But to proactively maintain revenue, I'd be looking at, what is my payer mix and my patient mix right now,
right,
and which ones of them are really in danger of losing coverage. And see, being proactive with them to be like, hey, you need to make sure that you recertify and renew and
right.
show that you need this sort of thing.
Right. Payer mix is very important
Mhm.
because you have the wrong payer type. If you just have one, then you could really be in jeopardy, especially if you are government funded.
Funded. Yeah.
Like that's a big deal because now who has control of your company?
Right.
The government does.
Yeah.
So you can go bankrupt any second.
It's really you can't rely on it anymore. That's for sure.
Yeah.
It's not enough to stay afloat.
No, it's not enough. And if you've been, relying on Medicaid and just lolly-da, just spending and doing whatever, you really need to buckle down ASAP because we're almost in 2026.
6. Yeah. Yeah. No, it is too fastly approaching, that's
No,
for sure.
really.
There's a certain things that I'm still looking out for to see how it'll go is the one big beautiful bill did have this rural health transformation fund,
Mm,
but like I haven't really heard anything in terms of how states are getting their act together because the way that it works is that like half the money is being spread to all the states,
right.
and then the other half is depending on the applications that the states agencies put in themselves, and they can only be used for specific things in
Mm,
terms of, and it's like the um, transformation piece. So one of the big things about the transformation piece is that they are looking to use that money to do value-based arrangements. So
mhm,
if any of these home care agencies can really come up with a good value-based arrangement where they're like, we can offer this service for this bundle payment per day, per patient sort of thing,
mm,
that's a possibility. Again, I wish I had heard more from Virginia and the area I'm at about like what our state is targeting. Again, but this is rural areas, so
okay.
rural areas only. Um, but the reality is that that money, that rural health transformation
Yeah.
fund, can't be used to fund losses. That's the thing that really stinks, which I think is a real flaw
Mhm,
in that it's not realistic. I think that in some sort of transformation period that there's just not going to be losses. And if you can't keep something afloat during the transformation, there's going to be nothing. It's one of
mm,
those like in the long run, it's not there anyway. If you can't allow some of that money to be used to fund
mm.
losses, and unfortunately, it's not permitted, at least from what I've seen.
So that's important if that is coming down the pipeline for the rural areas to kind of see how they can provide care at basically like a cheaper value.
If
What can they
well,
bundle?
value based, yeah.
Yeah.
If they can come up with a good, if they can look at their numbers and be like, I can do some sort of bundle for home care, that for this many patients per patient per day,
Mhm.
or per member per month sort of
Right.
thing, that's definitely something I would tell them to look at. And that's definitely something, they work with someone like you to be like, what would be a good number to offer, a package to come up
Right.
with. That would be something I would say that they could try to capitalize on. But again, I think whenever you're kind of moving from where you are to somewhere else, I think the issue I have with it is that there's no way you're not doing losses when you're kind of making a shift like
Right.
that. And
Yeah.
if, the losses are going to be big enough, then there won't be anything in existence anyway
Right.
to continue. And the other thing is that if the money is not used, I'm pretty sure it just goes back to the federal government anyway. So who
Right.
knows how much of that $50 billion fund is actually going to be used anyway.
So do you think with this big beautiful bill, are they trying to kind of get rid of the in-home care piece, or do you think they're just making it where it's
I don't think it's that, because what they're really looking to hit on is the real cost is inpatient services. That's where they're
okay?
like, that's really where the big, that's where the money is. I mean, any long-term care services do cost a
Right.
lot, but anything where a patient is being taken care of, like in a bigger setting, like nursing home, anything like
Yeah.
that, in a hospital, that's really where the high dollars are. And, they stripped a lot of support for that.
And that is so crazy
It
because
is, yeah.
that's where you need the support. Like,
I mean, it's needed everywhere. It just is not, it's in terms of making sense of how people are gonna survive, I think it's really, people are
yeah,
having a hard time understanding.
yeah.
And, people that are able to make a play are gonna be the ones that survive, and I hate saying that, but that's ultimately where we're at
So
right now.
basically, the big players is who possibly will be able to survive what's to come.
Um, I mean, they have more. They always have more resources. They always
Right.
have more resources. But anybody who's maybe again trying to come up with a strategy again,
Yeah.
if they can capitalize on that money on the that rural health fund. Um, but in terms of who's going to survive, again, it's like it'll be interesting, but it's scary. It's a scary time because
Yeah.
it just wasn't. I don't think it was what anybody wanted or needed right now.
Definitely a scary time because it's not like it's just anybody that they're taking care of. It's the most
It's
vulnerable
vulnerable. Yeah.
population that we have.
Right.
Like,
Correct.
they
Yeah.
need care. They're
Care.
not able to care. It's like having a newborn baby.
Right. Right.
They can't do anything. They can't fend for themselves.
Selves, correct, right.
So it's
It's very, very scary, and as I said, it's just it people are I don't wanna say they're in la la land, but it's definitely like a delayed reaction to reality because it's
yeah.
not hitting them immediately, where,
Yes.
like, if they pass the bill and it hit them tomorrow like, the next day, I think you would see a lot, but
Oh yeah.
because it's, months down the road, people are kind of in slight denial.
Yeah, I've talked to a few, well, a lot of agency owners I've spoken to, and they're trying to see how to basically diversify their
Yeah,
payer mix. But a lot of times what they don't understand is like having an advisor in place, having an attorney in place, those things are so important to your payer mix because one, you have your advisor that can look to see what makes sense. If you go and just charge anything, if you're doing private
right.
pay, you got Medicaid, you have to see what makes sense and what's going to make the agency more profitable,
Well,
especially for what's to come.
yeah, correct.
And then you have your attorney that can look at your contracts, tell you where you're slipping at to be very proactive.
Right.
I don't think that they are really grasping that
I
like,
think it's a mix. It's definitely a mix. I mean, again, if this is someone's like first business, it's just hard. You get scared. And I
yeah,
always try to give, some grace for that. It's scary.
yeah,
And, I always value the fact that someone comes to me with, and they probably are scared. They're really, and that's part of my job is to try to like, you know, be someone who tries to give them what I can in terms of options to get
right.
themselves out. But it's a mix. Sometimes it's denial. Sometimes it's just they're juggling too many things. Sometimes they might not
Yeah,
agree. But I think a lot, again, the ones that are like, I had a career and then I switched to this because it was my calling. I think,
yeah,
it's just one of those, being a business owner can be really scary. And that's the
yes.
thing. They're almost petrified sometimes into not doing anything.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
because a lot of times they get into business because of the skill that they have,
Yeah.
and not because it's like, "Oh, I am business savvy.
Savvy.
I can run this business. I know the contracts." So it's the passion that they have for the population that they're serving.
Correct. And there was a time that, you could do pretty well just off passion, but it's
Yeah.
just not that, it's
Yeah.
not that way anymore.
Yeah, times have definitely changed. So are there any specific contract amendments or legal structures that agencies should implement before those cuts take effect? Now, I think we talked about some, but I'll
Well,
let
I
you
said
recap.
I don't see any uh getting deposits from people that you already have contracts with, but probably more on the payment terms. If you're late, you're getting charged interest, and we can terminate after this amount of time, that sort of
Right,
thing. I would look at those amendments definitely, and it'll come down to sort of looking at how long you can stay afloat without that money, and it's usually
right.
not that long.
Mm,
So, and just making sure those are really clear with everybody. And again, the other thing is looking at all of your recipients and your patients and letting them know, like, do you need help renewing your insurance or your Medicaid or
right.
Medicare or anything like that? Those are really going to
I
be
think
key.
that was so important that when you said that earlier, like to be very proactive, already be speaking to your recipients
Mhm.
so that one, you're informing them too, because a lot of times they don't know what's happening.
And they're just like, a lot, they care if they're being taken care of by adult children.
Right.
It's a lot. And it's just,
It is a
people
lot.
juggling a lot. I mean, sometimes people do that to me with some of my responsibilities. And it's like, it's not that I don't know or that I don't care. It's just a lot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's important. So if you could give every seven-figure home care CEO listening just one legal move to protect and grow their business in 2025 or 2026, what would it be?
Probably revise your contracts. You got to
Mm,
review and revise as needed to do what you need to stay in business, really. So you
mm.
can actually be there for the community to help them. Because if you don't, then, again, in the long run, there's nothing there.
Right. So review and revise
Mhm,
your contracts.
mhm.
That is important. So that's a big deal. So thank you so much, Rachel,
Oh,
for
of
coming
course, of
on. I
course.
always enjoy speaking with you,
Yes,
and
yes.
especially when it comes to law. It's interesting that so much happening, and this big old so-called beautiful bill that's coming down the pipeline. I think that it's so much happening that they need you on their team.
Yes, yes, and it's, Richmond has a lot of good resources, and they need you just as much as well to come up, again, with a good strategy. And again, if they can look into the value-based stuff and sort of those, like, bundled
Yeah.
things, that's really what I would say, that's something that they need to be talking to you for.
Yeah, so thank you so much
You're
again, and thank you
welcome.
guys for watching. We'll see you guys later.